Chapter 60, Simple Boy Mu Zhian 4K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Huang Manting, daughter of Mr. Huang of the Morning Chamber of Commerce, was a prodigious talent, reaching the 8th grade in qi cultivation. She'd never known scolding or abuse. By 13, she'd peaked in Jing refining, entering the qi refining realm at 14, smart and gifted. She hadn't become spoiled despite her wealthy, busy parents, but Huang Manting's problem was actually much bigger than just being spoiled. The Morning Chamber of Commerce, a luxurious mansion in the heart of Tianxian City, showcased its owner's wealth. Inside, Huang Manting, the so-called demon girl, sat cross-legged, chin in her hands, her black embroidered shoes swinging from her delicate feet. Her spy, who was responsible for secretly investigating Mu Zhian, stood respectfully nearby, reporting his findings from the past few days. "Miss, here's the information on Mu Zhian I've gathered." Huang Manting narrowed her eyes. A few years ago, he was a useless young master, obsessed with beauty, good for nothing except his looks. Then, he became more restrained, falling madly for Bai Ruoshi, but she repeatedly rejected him. The Bai family then suffered a disaster, suppressed by my father and the Gongsun clan leader. Bai Ruoshi had to seek help from the Mu family. So far, so good. But now the Bai family head is back, and the sect assessment's about to start. Bai Ruoshi has no reason to stick with Mu Zhian. Given Bai Ruoshi's show of strength yesterday, entering the Liangyi sect would be easy, maybe even competing for an inner disciple spot. Why would she be so devoted to Mu Zhian, unless she likes him? But Bai Ruoshi used to despise him. He wasn't even a backup plan. Why the sudden change? Could she be threatened? Her maid suggested. Huang Manting casually toed off her shoe. Impossible. Unless the Bai family faces total ruin, Miss Bai wouldn't do this. Besides, I didn't see any resistance from her yesterday. Maybe she just likes Mu Zhian. The maid guessed. Huang Manting dropped her shoe, twirled her hair, and squinted. Now that's interesting. How did Mu Zhian win over the cold, beautiful woman in just days? And, what would Bai Ruoshi do if she knew her man was changing, even becoming someone's puppet? Huang Manting tapped the chair. The maid, understanding, knelt and put the shoe back on Huang Manting's foot. A servant rushed in, a strange look on his face. "Miss, Master Mu's at the door asking to see you." He remembered Mr. Huang's instructions at the auction. If Mu Zhian asked for him, say he was out. Clearly, Mr. Huang didn't want to get involved in the Mugongsun Bai family feud. He was a businessman, and profit came first. Huang Manting looked up. "Didn't you tell him father's not here?" "Yes, but Master Mu said he came to see you." "Oh." Huang Manting's interest peaked. As Tianxian City's biggest chamber, the Morning Chamber had dealings with many families, including the Mu family, but Mu Zhian and Huang Manting had barely spoken before. While she was beautiful, her personality turned him off. His visit sparked her curiosity. "Show him in," Huang Manting said. Soon, a handsome young man entered, guided by servants. Huang Manting gave a sweet smile. "Master Mu, please, sit down." After Mu Zhian was seated, she dismissed the servants and poured him tea. "Master Mu, to what do we owe the pleasure of your visit?" Huang Manting asked softly. Mu Zhian smiled. "Actually, nothing. But I recently learned Miss Huang's been investigating me." The Mu family's connections were impressive. The news leaked in less than half a day. Huang Manting narrowed her eyes, her voice clear. "Master Mu, are you here to scold me?" Her actions were mere curiosity, not a threat. The Mu family would only give a verbal warning. If Mu Zhian came to complain, it would only show he was incompetent and furious. But Mu Zhian shook his head. "I could never scold a beauty like Miss Huang," he smiled. Huang Manting, pleased, narrowed her eyes. "Then what is Master Mu here for?" "To satisfy Miss Huang's curiosity," Mu Zhian said seriously. "Instead of a long, fruitless investigation, I'll answer your questions myself." Huang Manting smiled sweetly. "You came here just to satisfy my curiosity. If Miss Bai knew, wouldn't she be jealous?" asterisk sounds like she wants to be a homewrecker asterisk, Mu Zhian thought. He sipped his tea and smiled. She's not the jealous type. He wasn't great with women, but Bai Ruoshi seemed tolerant. After all, to be able to hold others the way she did, she definitely had a big heart. I heard Master Mu used to chase Miss Bai, always hot and bothered while she was always cold. Is it true? Huang Manting asked suddenly. Since he offered to answer, she wouldn't hold back. True, Mu Zhian nodded, smiling. He was always warm to her coldness, but Bai Ruoshi had been indifferent, even annoyed. Only his status as the Mu family's eldest son stopped her from being blunt, but even now, Mu Zhian was just as hot and cold. Only, Bai Ruoshi had been much more enthusiastic lately, even a little shy. Strange, how did Master Mu win Miss Bai over in just a few days? Huang Manting asked. Mu Zhian smiled. I pursued her the same way I always did. He sighed. Ruoshi's a simple girl. She agreed because she was moved by my sincerity. Huang Manting smiled lightly. Congratulations, Master Mu. It must be great to win someone like Miss Bai. Mu Zhian smiled. I feel lucky. Huang Manting changed the subject. Miss Bai's attack yesterday was amazing. She defeated Gongsun Cheng with one sword. What do you know about her bronze sword? This was her real question. She cared about his relationship, but she cared more about Bai Ruoshi's power, Mu Zhian pondered. I don't know much, but she's probably unmatched in her rank. Huang Manting stared into his eyes. Master Mu's so sure. You're at the 8th level, right? You saw the sword's power much better than I did, Mu Zhian said. Huang Manting was silent. She didn't want to admit it, but she felt powerless seeing Bai Ruoshi's sword. She kept thinking she could fight back if she avoided the weird sword, but could it really be avoided? It seems Miss Bai will dominate her peers and enter the Lianyi sect as the top disciple, Huang Manting said quietly. Mu Zhian smiled, saying nothing. He came to the morning chamber to negotiate and show off to the Gongsun family. Talking to Huang Manting was just killing time. Then, Huang Manting suddenly changed her tone. I might not beat Bai Ruoshi, but if... She placed her hand on Mu Zhian's, looked up, and said softly, what if I became Bai Ruoshi's rival? Stop being Bai Ruoshi's man. Be mine. She held his hand tightly. Mu Zhian frowned, slightly embarrassed but also moved. Miss Huang, this is inappropriate. I can't do that to Ruoshi. Huang Manting's mouth twitched. The teacup shook, splashing tea on her chest. She stood, flustered. Oh, Mr. Mu, could you wipe it for me? Mu Zhian looked down, helpless. Miss Huang, I really can't. Ruoshi would be mad. Just wipe it for me. Huang Manting grabbed his hand, put a handkerchief in it, and guided his hand to wipe the tea. Mu Zhian reluctantly wiped it. Huang Manting noticed his performance, her eyes filled with contempt. Bai Ruoshi was strong, but her taste in men was disappointing. A little trick, and he's hooked. First, wiping tea. Next, licking her feet. Training should be gradual. Sorry, I'm so clumsy, Huang Manting said, her eyes apologetic. You're not mad, are you? Miss Huang, please don't tell Ruoshi. She'll be mad at me, Mu Zhian said helplessly. If she's mad, you can spend more time with me, right? Huang Manting said softly. By the way, we have an auction in 2 days. I'd like you to join me in a private room. Would you do me the honor? She looked up, her eyes pleading. If you refuse, I'll tell Miss Bai everything. Mu Zhian said in embarrassment, but I really can't let Ruoshi down. Sigh. He sighed heavily. Huang Manting's mouth curled into a charming smile. Just this once, just join me this once, okay? She grabbed his hand with both of hers, her eyes pleading, a soft voice, a charming face, a pitiful plea. Someone weaker might fall into her trap. Mu Zhian, showing his acting skills, sighed, gently kneaded her soft little hand, and said. Okay. But Miss Huang, don't threaten me like that again. Really? Great. Huang Manting patted her chest, a strand of hair falling. looking particularly charming. Mu Zhian chatted more, his eyes uncontrollably drawn to her, then, seeing it was late, he said goodbye. Miss Huang, see you at the auction in 2 days. I'll find you, he bowed. Huang Manting smiled and nodded. Well, I'm looking forward to it. With the maid's farewell, Mu Zhian left the morning chamber of commerce. He clenched his fist, recalling the witch's field, that weight isn't even half of Bai Ruoshi's, No wonder she didn't win most beautiful woman in Tianxian City, First, her sadist personality, and second, her chest is far less than Bai Ruoshi's, Mu Zhian got in the carriage. Let's go to Chaohai Inn. I'll buy some osmanthus cake and visit senior sister Lan, The snow lotus I gave her is almost dead. I can give her a new one, Chapter 61 Listen to your sister, the water is deep and you can't control it. 5K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mu Zhian took a carriage to Chaohai Inn and picked up their famous osmanthus cakes before heading to Lan Murian's inn. He hopped off the carriage, went inside, and knocked on her door. Come in, a clear, cool voice called out. It was like ice cubes clinking in a glass of water, instantly calming any nerves. Mu Zhian opened the door to find his senior sister, who'd been in Tianxian City for days but spent most of her time in the inn, rarely venturing out. Lan Murian looked like she'd just finished meditating, slowly opening her eyes. Her moon-white dress accentuated her pale skin, giving her a translucent beauty in the dim light. One glance at her clear eyes was enough to make anyone feel self-conscious, but not Mu Zhian. He wasn't intimidated. Lan Murian might be a refining god realm cultivator with a high status, but that didn't matter. He was just a guy, after all. Mu Zhian set the box on the table, turned, and smiled. I mentioned in my letter yesterday that I'd treat you to Chaohai Inn's osmanthus cake, so here it is. Did you even read the letter, senior sister? No, Lan Murian replied coolly. Mu Zhian couldn't help but glance at the open paper crane on the table. He pretended not to notice and said with a smile, this osmanthus cake is amazing. You should try it. Lan Murian nodded slightly, saying reservedly, just set it aside for now. Guess I won't see her face anytime soon. Mu Zhian thought with a hint of disappointment. He'd hoped she would remove her veil to eat the cake, finally giving him a glimpse of her beauty. Unfortunately, she didn't seem keen on revealing her face to anyone. Oh, and that snow lotus looked like it had withered, so I brought you another one. Mu Zhian noticed the dead snow lotus in the vase. As if by magic, he produced a fresh snow lotus that radiated a faint, soothing fragrance and placed it in the vase. Too bad I don't have any Liuguang soil. This flower would last a few more months. Mu Zhian sighed with regret. Lan Murian stared at the snow lotus in the vase, a hint of doubt flickering in her eyes. Did you give me a snow lotus last time too? Why does it sound like he's given me one before? If I remember correctly, that snow lotus was just a decoration the Yangfeng Inn waiter put here a few days ago. How could he have given it to me? Mu Zhian turned to face his upright senior sister and smiled. These snow lotuses only grow in a small pond in the Mu Mansion. I doubt anyone else in Tianxian City has them. The snow lotus on the paper crane was definitely from me. As if remembering something, he added, oh, I did hear that the owner of Yangfeng Inn is trying to cultivate some snow lotuses artificially, but they can't compare to the ones from the Mu Mansion. At least, the fragrance isn't as good. Lan Murian's eyes flickered. She stood up, walked to the table, and studied the pure white snow lotus in the vase. She lowered her head and inhaled its fragrance. The faint, minty scent filled her nose, giving her a sudden jolt of clarity. This is different from the snow lotus at the inn. The fragrance, even the quality, is much better. So. Mu Zhian claims he sent one with a paper crane last time. Where is that snow lotus now? Lan Murian's eyes flickered again, and they widened slightly, as if a thought had just struck her. Last time, she hadn't moved the paper crane, meaning it flew to the back of Liangyi's sect. Did the snow lotus end up with the master? Given his personality, what would he do with it? For some reason, the normally cold and composed beauty seemed to be fighting back a smile behind her veil. Mu Zhian couldn't help but stare at Lan Murian. Her creamy skin, her smiling eyebrows, her beautiful face faintly visible under the veil, and her cool, mysterious aura were alluring. He felt an urge to lift the veil right then and there, but, considering that it wasn't the right moment, he held back. Then, Mu Zhian noticed a thin booklet on the table. It was open to a page with several names, Bai Ruoxi, Gong Suncheng, Huang Manting, Yi Yu, and even Yi Lingxian. Beneath each name was a summary of the person's life, basic but accurate. 3 of the names were circled, Bai Ruoxi, Huang Manting, and Yi Lingxian. These must be the contestants she's most optimistic about in this sect assessment. Mu Zhian thought, Bai Ruoxi, for sure. Since fusing with the bronze fragment, his strength has exploded, especially with the heavenly Dao Qi. He's practically unbeatable among his peers. Huang Manting has always been considered second only to Gong Suncheng, a top-tier talent. Yi Lingxian. She's a bit of a surprise. Aside from being pretty, she doesn't stand out. She does have the air of a young lady, more than just an heir to the Yi family. And Yi Yu's name isn't circled. So, the chosen one doesn't impress Lan Murian. Scanning further, Mu Zhian found his own name buried in the dense text. The entry covered his life story, ending with, slippery tongue, a bit of a pervert. Be careful. Mu Zhian frowned, annoyed. He looked up calmly. Senior sister, where did you get this booklet? This level of detail couldn't have been gathered in just a few days. Lan Murian glanced at him, saying coolly, I have my ways. Since she clearly wasn't going to elaborate, Mu Zhian changed tack. The circled names, those are the candidates you like, right? Yi Lingxian just reached the Qi training stage. Does she have hidden talent? Lan Murian studied Mu Zhian intently. Don't offend her. Do you know her? Mu Zhian asked. Lan Murian shook her head. I don't know her, but the elders have specifically instructed me that Yi Lingxian must be one of the candidates who joined the sect this time. Mu Zhian reread Yi Lingxian's entry. She seemed ordinary, grew up in the Yi family, reached the Qi refining realm before 15. Nothing special, he pondered. The person who wrote this booklet has an agenda. You can't trust it completely. Lan Murian looked at him sideways, a hint of displeasure in her usually calm eyes. Mu Zhian frowned. How bad does this booklet make me out to be? Obsessed with beauty as a kid, and now I suppress my desires but am still a pervert at heart. What is that supposed to mean? Complete slander. To his surprise, Lan Murian shot him a cold glance and said, leave if you have nothing else to say. Why is she mad? Mu Zhian asked, senior sister, I'll take you around Tianxian City soon. I promised to take you out in my last letter, but you've been stuck in this inn. That's no fun. Lan Murian shook her head gently. I can't leave easily. It would cause too much commotion. All the cultivators in Tianxian City knew she was here. It was manageable in the crowded competition arena, but in a public place, she'd be stared at constantly. She didn't like that. Mu Zhian noticed her obvious unhappiness and nodded. All right, we'll wait for another time. He left the room. As he stepped into the carriage, he noticed a tall beauty in a red dress from the corner of his eye. She wasn't a slender young girl, but her figure was as ripe and alluring as a peach, drawing the eye. Strange, why is Sister Feiying visiting Yang Feng in so often lately? Mu Zhian watched Feiying disappear into the inn, then shook his head. He got into the carriage and leaned back on the soft cushions. The afternoon sun streamed through the curtains, and he closed his eyes, feeling relaxed. Everything is set. Now, I just need to wait for the sect assessment and breeze through the back door into Liangyi sect. The rest is just a warm-up. The carriage passed Chao Hai Inn. He opened his eyes and caught sight of a girl standing by the door. Her pure, sweet face, like first love, was radiant in the sunlight. She was slender and graceful, the thin belt highlighting her waist. Her long hair fluttered in the breeze, giving her a classical beauty. It was Yi Qian. Stop for a moment, Mu Zhian told the driver. He opened the curtain and got out. Nearby, Yi Qian, in a light blue dress, stood at the inn entrance, seemingly lost in thought. She suddenly felt a shadow fall over her. She looked up, surprised, and said, Master Mu. What are you doing here? I was just passing by and saw you. I guess it's fate. Mu Zhian glanced at the busy Chaohai Inn and smiled. Miss Qianer, what are you doing out here on such a hot day? Eating alone. Yi Qian looked up at Mu Zhian and nodded. This morning, Sister Lingxian and I were talking about how delicious the osmanthus cake is here, but she didn't believe me. I wanted to bring one back for her to try, but... She looked at the crowd and sighed. Chaohaian was always busy, and you usually had to reserve their osmanthus cake in advance. Yi Qian clearly didn't know that, since in the past, the Yi mansion servants had always taken care of it. It was her first time coming here herself. Mu Zhian considered for a moment and smiled. Wait here for me. Confused, Yi Qian watched Mu Zhian enter Chaohaian. Soon, she saw him emerge with a box of osmanthus cake, handing it to her. Yi Qian blinked, glancing at Mu Zhian. Master Mu, how did you get osmanthus cake? That she just asked the waiter, who told her they were sold out, yet Mu Zhian went in for less than a minute and bought some. He gave her a mysterious smile. I have my ways. Mu Zhian can buy osmanthus cake because he is Mu Zhian, and the Mu family is behind him. Even if they're sold out, this inn will find a way to get him one, but other people don't get such special treatment, Yi Qian hesitated. I can't accept this. Miss Qianer, it's just a small thing. I wanted to invite you and Miss Lingxian to enjoy it. Don't worry about it. Mu Zhian smiled, seeing her hesitation. He asked, did someone tell you something? Yesterday's qi training pill should have been enough to put her at ease, but she's so hesitant today. Something must have happened after she went back. Yi Qian hesitated, then whispered, Sister Lingxian and Brother Yi Yu both told me not to get close to you. Yi Yu, fine. But I didn't expect Yi Lingxian to tell her that too. Mu Zhian sighed. Sister Qianer, do I seem like a bad guy? Yi Qian looked up at the boy. He had a kind, gentle smile, like a neighbor's brother. No. Then that's enough, right? Your brother Yi Yu and I have some issues, but it has nothing to do with you. Mu Zhian smiled. Yi Qian's frown eased. She held the box of osmanthus cake with both hands and nodded shyly. In the sunlight, a faint smile appeared on her face. Mature, charming ladies are great, but this kind of girl, who would burst into tears if you punched her, is pretty good too. Mu Zhian thought. Sister Qianer, come to my house sometime. I'll treat you to our homemade osmanthus cake. The young girl looked up at him, her beautiful almond eyes flickering shyly, as if covered in mist. She lowered her gaze and nodded. Her guard was down. It's hot. I'll have the driver take you home, Mu Zhian offered. Yi Qian looked surprised. Then wouldn't you have to walk back? It's just a short walk. It's fine, Mu Zhian smiled. The beautiful 15-year-old lowered her eyes, hiding her shyness and joy. Her voice was sweet and clear. Then, thank you. She really appreciated being looked after so carefully. Yi Mansion. Yi Yu opened his eyes, feeling spiritual energy coursing through his body, his cauldron starting to take shape. The peak of the refining essence stage. If I refine the qi training pill today, I can break through within 2 days. He was quite pleased with this progress. Losing the qi of heaven seems to have made me more talented. The path is harder, but as long as I get stronger, it's worth it. At the sect assessment, I'll defeat Mu Zhian squarely and be rid of that worry. Then, I can start my adventure. Yi Yu felt a surge of excitement. He left his room, finding the familiar scenery strangely beautiful. His family was training in the yard. Yi Yu looked around and spotted Yi Lingxian sitting on a stone chair in the pavilion, her snow-white calves peeking out from under her lavender skirt. Lingxuan's looks are probably on par with Bai Ruoshi's. It's been a while since we talked since I lost my talent. Yi Yu thought and stepped forward to say hello. Then, he saw the snow lotus in Yi Lingshuan's hand. Yi Yu froze, his eyes fixed on the flower. In Tianxian City, only Mu Mansion cultivated snow lotus. Yang Feng'an had some, but they were soulless. He'd heard that Yi Lingshuan had gone to Mu Mansion yesterday, so, she must have taken it from there. Yi Yu's eyes hardened. He turned and left the yard. As he reached the gate, he saw a carriage parked in front of the Yi Mansion. The Mu's carriage. Yi Yu stared at it and the innocent girl who stepped out of it. Yi Qian looked up, holding a box of osmanthus cake. She hesitated at the sight of Yi Yu's grim face, forced a smile, and asked, "Brother Yi Yu, want some osmanthus cake?" "No." Yi Yu replied coldly, staring at the Mu's carriage. "Were you at Mu Mansion?" That his tone wasn't like a brother's concern for his sister but more like an interrogation. Yi Qian noticed his change and looked at him. "I ran into Brother Mu at Chao Haiyan. He had the driver take me back. Don't get close to him. He has no good intentions," Yi Yu said. Yi Qian lowered her head. Her cheerful mood vanished. "Okay." She silently entered the Yi Mansion, clutching the osmanthus cake. Recalling Yi Yu's cold expression, Yi Qian hugged the box tightly, feeling upset. Her good mood was ruined as soon as she got home. No one would be happy about that. Yi Qian walked through the courtyard in her deerskin boots. When she saw the beautiful girl in the purple dress in front of the pavilion, her eyes regained some light. She hurried forward. Sister Lingshuan. She wanted to share everything with her sister. Chapter 62. It's broken, I won't flip over, right? You are listening at novelfull.audio. That afternoon, Gong Sun Cheng stood in a room, a dark look on his face as he stared at his father lying in bed. His father, seriously injured, had recently called him in and given him a harsh dressing down, mainly for his planned attack on Mu Zhian in the arena. Gong Sun Cheng had been annoyed at first. Sure, he'd considered going after Mu Zhian, but he dropped it, right? To get yelled at like that over such a minor thing. He was definitely ticked off, but soon after, his men brought news. The Gongsun family's 3 market districts were being transferred to the Mu family. Apparently, it was compensation for Mu Zhian being mentally traumatized. "Dad, you actually buy that garbage about Mu Zhian being traumatized?" Gongsun Cheng's anger was bubbling over. He glared at his father, his eyes full of resentment. Gongsun Xiong didn't look much happier. He looked at his useless son and said coldly, "Do you think I'm an old fool? I just gave up 3 market districts because Mu Zhian got a fright, that he knew it wasn't all his son's fault." Even if Gong Sun Cheng hadn't acted up, Mu Zhian would have found another excuse to stir up trouble. Then why? Gong Sun Cheng hesitated. Gong Sun Xiong sighed heavily. Mu Zhian visited the Dawn Chamber of Commerce today. That was the real reason he'd agreed to hand over the market districts. But my guys reported that Mr. Huang wasn't at the chamber today. Mu Zhian could just be faking his influence, Gong Sun Cheng said. Whether Mu Zhian is tight with Mr. Huang doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that the Huang girl also met with Mu Zhian, Gong Sun Xiong said grimly. You know what that girl's like. Gong Sun Cheng was speechless. He knew Huang Manting a little too well. Mr. Huang's daughter had a reputation for being wild and rebellious. She was known to be a sadist. She hated people who were obsessed with beauty, like Mu Zhian. Whether it was Mr. Huang or Huang Manting meeting with Mu Zhian, it was a bad sign. Mu Zhian and Bai Ruoxi were already close, and now he seemed to be flirting with the Huang girl. Regardless of whether it was real or a trick, the Gongsun family couldn't take that risk. Giving up those districts was necessary. The Gongsun family fools who were after his position, that idiot Mu Zhian. They probably still didn't understand the real value of the Tongmai pill. Once someone reached the Return to Void realm, taking over neighboring cities would be easy. It wasn't an exaggeration that those in the Return to Void realm were called demigods. He just had to bide his time until his injury healed. Once he was healed and had taken the Tongmai pills, the Gongsun family would strike back. That evening, at the Dawn Chamber of Commerce, Huang Manting lounged in a tea chair, toying with a teacup with her delicate fingers, a charming smile on her face. Looks like Bai Ruoxi is strong, but her judgment is a bit off. Remembering how Mu Zhian had seemed like an innocent virgin in front of her, Huang Manting felt a thrill of delight. She couldn't wait for the day Bai Ruoxi walked into the Dawn Chamber of Commerce and saw Mu Zhian kneeling at her feet, begging for mercy. What would her reaction be then? Sure, she might be unbeatable, but the man she wanted would be her dog, groveling and enslaved. Suddenly, her attendant's voice came from outside. Miss. Huang Manting glanced up and said calmly, what is it? There's been some activity on Gongsun family land. The 3 market districts seem to be getting transferred to the Mu family. Huang Manting paused, her fingers still playing with the teacup. After a moment, her perfectly arched toes peeked out from under her embroidered shoes. She looked at the attendant, her smile still steady. Gongsun Xiong is injured. He wouldn't give up control, even like that. Even so, the Gongsun family shouldn't agree to hand over 3 whole districts to the Mu family. You're sure about that? The attendant hesitated, then nodded. That's odd. Even if the Mu and Bai families team up, the Gongsun family could always ask my father for help. So why? The smile on Huang Manting's face froze, her mind raced as she recalled Mu Zhian chatting and laughing with her, how shy he seemed when she teased him, how obsessed he looked at her. Finally, she let out a slow breath, her face turning ugly. She realized, she'd been played. I came here today to satisfy your curiosity was a lie. Mu Zhian's only goal had been to hang around the Dawn Chamber of Commerce and chat with her, to create the impression that he was close to the chamber. He hadn't been interested in her, but the Gongsun family's market districts. I'm not even worth a few districts. Huang Manting's face was twisted. She remembered Mu Zhian's gentle attitude toward Bai Ruoxi earlier and his embarrassed look when he faced her. He was probably laughing at her the whole time. Mu Zhian. Her eyes blazed with anger, and the teacup in her hand cracked, tea trickling down her knees to her toes. The maid knelt beside her, leaning forward slightly. Huang Manting shot her a cold look and said, just clean it up. The maid's eyes flickered with apprehension, but she bowed her head and said, yes, ma'am. She took out a handkerchief, grasped Huang Manting's toes, and began to wipe them. Huang Manting tapped her fingers on the edge of the chair. Those who knew her well knew she was furious. Miss. Is there anything else? The maid asked cautiously. I'll write a letter later. See that it gets delivered to the Mu mansion. Tell Mu Zhian he can't miss the auction in 2 days. I'll be waiting for him in the private room. Huang Manting's beautiful eyes were dark and cold. Because of her past impressions of Mu Zhian, she'd seen him as a spoiled, beauty-obsessed playboy. She'd underestimated him. She'd lost this round, but next time would be different. Mu Zhian strolled back to the Mu mansion. In the yard, he saw a tall, aloof beauty in a luxurious white dress that showed off her curves and a hint of cleavage. She was sitting on a chair, chatting with Wei Mengru. She looked up and smiled charmingly when she saw Mu Zhian. It was odd to see Wei Mengru chatting with someone. Mu Zhian smiled back at Bai Ruoxi and walked over to them. What are you talking about? You look so cheerful, Mu Zhian asked, smiling. About the snow lotus you gave me. A faint smile played on Bai Ruoxi's face. She paused, then continued, Mr. Mu, there's an auction at the Dawn Chamber of Commerce in 2 days. Would you like to go with me? Mu Zhian was taken aback. Why an auction? I heard from Wei Mengru that they'll be auctioning off a batch of Liuguang soil, and I want to buy some to preserve the snow lotus you gave me. But he'd already made a promise. Mu Zhian wondered how to politely decline. Seeing that he was silent, Bai Ruoxi didn't say anything for a moment. Her cold face made it impossible to know what she was thinking. She looked up and asked, or is this inconvenient, Master Mu? Do you already have plans? Maybe it was his imagination, but her eyes seemed deeper when she looked at him. Why did he feel like he still didn't know Bai Ruoxi well enough? Mu Zhian looked at the delicate, aloof beauty in her dark eyes, and the thought struck him. Just then, a servant entered the yard. Mu Zhian glanced at him and said, What is it? Master, a servant from the Dawn Chamber of Commerce came to the Mu mansion and asked me to deliver a letter from Miss Huang to you. He respectfully handed the letter to Mu Zhian, the eyes of both women on him. Chapter 63, the classic 3-line collapse 4.5K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A letter from Miss Huang. Mu Zhian's brow furrowed as he looked at the attendant, *, this kid's got no tact, *, handing over someone else's letter right here. Oh, and Miss Huang's attendant also asked me to give you a message, the clueless attendant continued. She says don't miss the auction in 2 days. She'll be waiting for you in a private room. Those were her exact words. A strange silence fell over the courtyard. An evening breeze stirred the water, causing ripples that made the snow lotuses sway, flaunting their beauty in what seemed like mockery. *, were you sent by the Gongsun family to take me out? You're boxing me in here, *, Mu Zhian said flatly. All right, you can go. Once the servant was gone, Mu Zhian turned to the 2 women with him. Bai Ruoshi looked disappointed. Sounds like you had a nice little chat with Miss Huang today. *, that's like saying, oh, so you're hooking up with some woman on the side. Mu Zhian sighed. Today was purely about those 3 markets from the Gongsun family. As for chatting with Huang Manting, it was just killing time. I couldn't just sit there like a bump on a log, could I? Bai Ruoshi looked blank. What about going to the auction with her in 2 days? *, you chatted with her about the markets, so what's the auction about? Mu Zhian reached for Bai Ruoshi's hand, but she quickly pulled away, making it clear she wasn't happy. He then looked at Wei Mengru, sensing his gaze. Wei Mengru didn't even bother to speak. She just gave him a scornful look before quietly slipping away. Sister Mengru's eyes said it all, *, Mu Zhian thought, watching her go. Fortunately, Wei Mengru wasn't the jealous type. Although usually quiet and a bit withdrawn, she was a very considerate and mature woman. She was leaving to give Mu Zhian and Bai Ruoshi some privacy. Dealing with just Bai Ruoshi would be much easier. Beneath that cool exterior, Bai Ruoshi had a soft heart. It was obvious, really. Give her a reasonable explanation, and she'd be fine. Seeing that Bai Ruoshi's eyes were still fixed on him, Mu Zhian pulled Huang Manting's letter from his pocket and handed it over. Bai Ruoshi tilted her head, confused. What's this supposed to mean? Mu Zhian sighed softly. Ruoshi, I know you've been feeling insecure lately because of everything that's going on with your family. I haven't been paying enough attention to your feelings. If you don't believe me, let's open the letter together and see what Miss Huang wrote. Bai Ruoshi looked surprised. You'd let me read it? Mu Zhian gently took her hand. Anything to put your mind at ease. It's worth it. This time, Bai Ruoshi didn't pull away, but just lowered her gaze shyly. Mu Zhian opened the letter. As the words appeared, Bai Ruoshi's eyes curiously followed along. Mr. Mu, that I almost came straight to the Mu mansion to give you a piece of my mind, but I managed to calm down. I have to admit, I underestimated you. Miss Bai's got good taste. Even if you're only at the 3rd level of Qi training, your brain works pretty well. You put on that whole show at the Dawn Chamber of Commerce for the Gongsun family, snagged those 3 market towns, and came out on top. But don't worry, I'm not mad, not anymore. In fact, I'm starting to appreciate your style. After all, you're the first person to play me for a fool. I'll be waiting for you in the private room at the Dawn auction house the day after tomorrow. I hope Mr. Mu will do me a favor. Even from an outsider's perspective, you could feel the resentment dripping from the page. Imagine being in her shoes. Some clueless playboy comes to visit, you treat him like an idiot, and then you're the idiot. It's enough to make your blood boil. If Mu Zhian wrote back right now, it'd be an all-out war. Bai Ruoshi finished reading and looked at Mu Zhian. In a soft, pleasant voice, she asked, you tricked her. The darkness in her eyes seemed to have lifted, replaced by excitement. Mu Zhian shook his head, smiling. I just had a conversation with her. I didn't lie about a thing. That's right. He just dropped by to chat and satisfy her curiosity. Nothing more. Even so. I still feel a little bad for her, Bai Ruoshi sighed. Someone as proud as Huang Manting, finding out she was being made a fool of, she's probably furious. Mu Zhian turned to look at Bai Ruoshi's beautiful profile and smiled. If you feel so bad for her, why are you smirking? Bai Ruoshi frowned. I'm not laughing. She bit her lip, trying hard to maintain her cool facade, but thinking about the letter and Huang Manting's sputtering anger at the Dawn Chamber of Commerce, Bai Ruoshi couldn't help but relax and feel a surge of happiness. Mu Zhian, also in good spirits, put his arm around Bai Ruoshi's waist. The most beautiful woman in Tianxian City felt a thrill of excitement, but she didn't pull away. It was a sharp contrast to how aloof she used to be around him, and just like that, a crisis was averted. So, are you going to keep her company the day after tomorrow? Bai Ruoshi asked. Mu Zhian nodded. If I don't have anything better to do. I'm curious what other tricks Miss Huang has up her sleeve. Bai Ruoshi pouted. I want to go to the auction, too. She didn't care about glazed earth, but it was hard to find near Tianxian City. She needed at least a little bit to keep her snow lotus alive. She was hoping he'd go with her, and Mu Zhian knew it. After a moment's thought, he nodded. Okay, I'll go with you. As for Huang Manting, whatever. He could swing by and leave when he wanted. Given the choice between Huang Manting and Bai Ruoshi, it wasn't a tough decision. Bai Ruoshi was far more interesting. Plus, he didn't have any real feelings for Huang Manting anyway. Feeling the warmth of his embrace, Bai Ruoshi's heart fluttered. She looked up at him, then rested her head on his shoulder, a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Meanwhile, at the Yangfeng Inn, Lan Feiying watched her sister writing a letter at her desk. It was mid-autumn. Lan Mulyan was wearing a flowing moon-white dress that showed off the graceful curve of her back and the slender waist defined by a ribbon. She radiated a cool elegance. Though breathtakingly beautiful, she often made people feel inferior and unable to meet her gaze. Sister, writing a letter to the Mu family's eldest son? Lan Feiying asked suddenly. Lan Mulyan paused, then said quietly, yes. He wrote first. I'm just returning the courtesy. Oh, Feiying replied, unconvinced. As beautiful as Lan Mulyan was, surely she'd received letters before. But Feiying had never seen her reply to any of them. Feiying knew better than to say anything. Her eyes drifted to the unopened osmanthus cake on the table. She narrowed her eyes and smiled. That osmanthus cake was also from the Mu family's son, right? Yes. Try it if you want. He says it's a famous pastry in Tianxian City. Lan Mulyan didn't deny it. It's definitely famous. The osmanthus cake here is delicious. I sometimes go to Chaohaian to get it when I have time. Fei Ying's eyes drifted to the snow lotus in a vase on the table. Did he give you those flowers, too? TSK. That guy must really like you, huh? Then again, you're already 23 this year. That's a bit older than him, isn't it? If I remember correctly, the Mu family's son just graduated this year. She paused, noticing her sister's gaze, and continued with a grin, but age doesn't matter to cultivators. As long as there's love, it's enough. Lan Mulyan gave her a cold look. We don't have that kind of relationship. She turned back to her letter. Lan Feiying smiled sweetly, leaned back in her chair, poured herself some tea, and took out a piece of osmanthus cake. Her eyes landed on the snow lotus again. Speaking of which, our auction house recently acquired a new batch of glazed earth. If you're interested, you should check it out. Glazed earth wasn't particularly rare, and Lan Feiying knew her sister could get it easily, but Lan Mulyan was still in Tianxian City. By the time she went back, the snow lotus Mu Zhian gave her would likely be dead. I'll be hosting the auction, so I won't have time to take you. If you don't know how to get there, maybe you could ask him to take you. Lan Feiying continued with a smile, I can get you a private room where no one will bother you. You won't have to worry about all the eyes on you. Lan Mulyan's beautiful eyes flickered in the candlelight. Lan Feiying's suggestion was tempting. If she were at Liangyi sect, she could easily preserve the snow lotus, but she was in Tianxian City. To prolong its life, only glazed earth would do, and staying in the inn every day wasn't ideal when she rarely left the mountain. Looking at the folded paper crane, Lan Mulyan hesitated, then unfolded it and wrote an invitation to Mu Zhian. Meanwhile, at the Yi mansion, Yi Qian sat next to Yi Lingxian. Sister, can we go to Chaohaian again sometime? The osmanthus cake is so good. Yi Qian said. Yi Lingxian looked at the girl and asked, "Is it because the osmanthus cake tastes good, or because the Mu family's son gave it to you?" "What are you talking about, sister?" Yi Qian pushed Yi Lingxuan's arm. Yi Lingxian smiled, seeing the shyness behind her sister's displeasure. She sighed inwardly, her sister was too naive. Mu Zhian had won her over with a qi training pill and a snack. If she wasn't around, he might kidnap her soon. "By the way, there's an auction in a few days. Wanna go?" Yi Qian asked. "I heard they'll have glazed earth that can preserve flowers for a long time. You brought back that snow lotus from the Mu mansion. It'd be a shame if it died." Yi Lingxian nodded. She'd planned to invite her sister, but Yi Qian had beat her to it. "But do you know how auctions work?" Yi Qian asked. Yi Lingxian had never been to one. When she wanted something, someone always brought it to her. She never needed anything, so there was no need to go. Yi Lingxian shook her head. "No, I don't." She paused, then said, "Should we ask Brother Yi you to take us?" Yi Qian frowned slightly. "It's up to you." She didn't seem happy, Yi Lingxian noticed. She changed her tone and said, "The Mu family's son doesn't have anything to do. I could write him a letter." Yi Qian looked up, eyes shining. "Wouldn't that be too much trouble?" Yi Lingxian was speechless. She always felt Mu Zhian had ulterior motives, but seeing Yi Qian's reactions to Yi Yu and Mu Zhian, she didn't want to say anything bad about him. "I'll have my servants deliver a letter to him later." Yi Lingxian sighed. Mu Zhian was smart. He'd already been warned a little, so he should know how to behave. Besides, the snow lotus was extremely rare, so it was worth the effort to preserve it. Later that night, Mu Zhian finished his meditation and practice. He sat in the moonlight in the backyard, leaning against a stone pillar, holding a paper crane in his hand, conflicted. The servant who delivered the letter earlier walked over. "What is it now?" Mu Zhian frowned. The servant hesitated, then handed over a letter. "A servant from the Yi mansion just delivered this. It's from Miss Yi Lingxian." Mu Zhian took the letter. After the servant left, he opened it. After a long silence, he unfolded the paper crane. Then, he spread out 3 letters at once: Huang Manting's invitation, Lan Mulian's paper crane invitation to the Dawn Chamber of Commerce auction, and Yi Lingxuan's letter, also inviting him to the auction. Looking at the 3 invitations, thinking back to Bai Ruoshi's invitation, Mu Zhian was lost in thought. Oh. Am I getting in over my head here? Chapter 64, Overturn. Can I, Mu Zhian, overturn? You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is a mess. Mu Zhian leaned against a courtyard wall, the 3 letters clutched in his hand. He stood there for a moment, lost in thought. First off, he couldn't blow off Bai Ruoshi again. She meant well, but testing her patience over and over was just plain dumb. Then there was Yi Lingxian. Judging by how wary she was of him last time, either Yi Qian wrote the letter, or she had Yi Lingxian write it for her. If Yi Qian were around today, she'd be that freshman who's totally smitten with some smooth-talking senior. Yi Lingxian, on the other hand, had a mysterious background and probably grew up on a diet of sweet nothings. A snow lotus and a few kind words from Mu Zhian weren't going to win her over. At best, it might have made her initial impression of him slightly less negative. Still, the invitation was a rare chance to spend some time with her. Mu Zhian wasn't particularly interested in a girl who wasn't particularly kind, but he was curious about the power behind Yi Lingxian. Once she passed the sex entrance exam, she'd be heading to Liangyi sect. With her looks, she'd probably have guys lining up to woo her, which left Lan Mulian. Could he really turn down her invitation? She'd been holed up like an ostrich lately, and now she was finally stepping out. If he blew her off, he might not get another chance to take his senior sister out. "This is tough," he mumbled. He glanced at the swaying snow lotus in the yard inside. Giving snow lotuses to Bai Ruoshi and the others had been a calculated move. Bai Ruoshi was the shy, retiring type. She wouldn't be competitive or show it off if he gave her one. Lan Mulian was also cold and aloof, but more refined than Bai Ruoshi. Although she let her girlish side show in her letters, she wouldn't bring up the snow lotus. And Yi Lingxian? Forget about it. She barely tolerated him. so there was no way she'd mention it, but now they all wanted to go to the Dawn auction house in a couple of days to bid for the Liuguang soil, to protect their snow lotus for a long time. That was the problem, he couldn't reject them all. They were all promising fish, and if he refused, they might swim away, but accepting all three? That was going to be a logistical nightmare, even a time management guru would struggle with that. Mu Zhian thought, gazing at the snow lotuses swaying in the soft moonlight. He couldn't help but sigh. Mengru, why do you think our Mu family even bothers growing these snow lotuses? Beside him, the tall, striking Wei Mengru materialized silently from the shadows. She gave him a cool look. If you hadn't gone around plucking snow lotuses from the yard and handing them out, things wouldn't be this way now, she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Mu Zhian looked up at her, catching the disdain in her eyes. Instead of getting annoyed, he just smiled knowingly. He imagined Wei Mengru as a maid, standing before him with her skirt held up, her eyes full of humiliation and contempt. Tisk, tisk, the thought alone made his heart race. Wei Mengru said coldly, "Are you thinking about dipping into the snow lotus pool?" Did she pick up on me thinking about her? Mu Zhian was slightly taken aback. But he quickly recovered. Right, because of what had happened to Wei Mengru in the past, she could sense other people's malice more clearly after reaching the realm of soul refining, but he didn't have any malicious intentions towards her. He was just imagining her reaction if he teased her. It wasn't very realistic right now, but it might be in the future. Mu Zhian thought about this and said, "Mengru, speaking of this snow lotus. This snow lotus represents loyalty and purity, just like me?" Wei Mengru asked, shooting him a sidelong glance. Mu Zhian shook his head, smiling. "I was wondering, if you pick one of these, how long will it take to wilt?" That the Mu mansion hadn't been growing snow lotuses for very long, and Mu Zhian hadn't paid much attention to them before, so he didn't know how long they lasted. Wei Mengru thought for a moment. It could be as short as 5 days, or as long as 10. Mu Zhian was surprised. "Any exceptions?" Wei Mengru shook her head. "None of the snow lotuses picked at the Mu mansion have ever withered in less than 5 days. That's strange." Mu Zhian frowned slightly. "I remember the one I gave my senior sister a few days ago. I don't remember exactly how many days, but it definitely wasn't 5. But when he brought the second snow lotus to the inn, the snow lotus in the vase had already withered. Was it the change of environment, or was the snow lotus not given to Lan Murian by him, but a fake one cultivated by Yang Fengyin? If so, where did the snow lotus that he gave to his senior sister go?" Wei Mengru said lightly, "If you're having regrets, you shouldn't have given so many snow lotuses to other girls." Mu Zhian snapped back to reality. He nodded slightly and said, "You're right. From now on, I'll only give snow lotuses to you, Mengru." Wei Mengru just grunted and said, "I don't need one." She paused and added, "If you want to pick it for yourself, that's fine." "It's not the same," Mu Zhian replied. "So, what's the plan now? Are you going to accept all 4 invitations?" Wei Mengru asked. Bai Ruoshi, Huang Manting, the Yi sisters, and Lan Murian, the one from Liangyi sect. She despised Mu Zhian's attempts to juggle so many women, but she was curious how he planned to get out of it. "It's simple, really. Just don't accept any of them," Mu Zhian said with a smile. "You're going to reject them all?" "No need to reject them," Mu Zhian replied, contradicting himself. "I really can't solve this riddle." Mu Zhian raised his head and glanced at Wei Mengru, but he couldn't make out her delicate features in the dark. He looked away, turning back to the snow lotus in the pond. He smiled. "But I can solve the problem." Chapter 65. Naive Man 5K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The key was getting enough Liuguang soil, the stuff that keeps snow lotus fresh. The girls weren't going to the auction for kicks. They wanted that soil, plain and simple, and Mu went to the Dawn Chamber of Commerce beforehand and scored 3 handfuls for them. Talk about dedication, right? Hearing that, Wei Mengru eyed Mu's smooth smile, like he was playing some game. She raised an eyebrow. After a beat, she got it. You're gonna bid on the whole batch of Liuguang soil. Mu shook his head. Too obvious. But snagging a few handfuls beforehand? No sweat. Wei Mengru saw right through him. Her eyes narrowed. If they come after you, don't expect me to bail you out. Mu grinned. Come on, Mengru, don't be like that. Didn't my mom tell you to keep me safe? Wei Mengru shot him a look. She said safe. That doesn't cover you pulling a stunt like this. Bai Ruashi's leveling up fast. In a few months, she'll hit the soul refining realm, and I might not be able to protect you, she added. Mu frowned. Even for Ruashi, how long to hit the soul refining realm? Wei Mengru nodded slightly. Qi refining peak to soul refining is a huge jump. Some people never make it, even after years of trying. It's not just talent, it's about understanding. A few months is hauling ass. How long did it take you to break through Qi refining? Mu asked. 2 weeks, Wei Mengru said casually. She paused, adding, I got lucky. Saw 2 soul refining monsters going at it in the woods, and boom, enlightenment. Otherwise, yeah, 2-3 months. O, you just stumbled onto a chance and dinged your way up, you're a chosen one, 2-star. That's talent and hard work. God helps those who help themselves, Mu said, tossing her a compliment. She didn't bite. Her face stayed blank. She just glanced at him and walked out of the yard. My young master is sharp. No lie. He's got all the angles covered so far. But you can't engineer emotions, can you? Especially not girls' emotions. Wei Mengru sees it all, but she ain't saying a word. She's actually hoping he screws up. As for why, well, duh. He's asking for it. Mu Zhian was used to Wei Mengru's cold shoulder, so he just smiled and watched her go. Tomorrow, dawn auction. Mu thought, feeling the chill of the night and heading inside. He quietly pushed open Bai Ruashi's door. The girl, pale and gentle, sat cross-legged on the bed, eyes closed. The room shimmered with purified spiritual energy. Gotta hustle, or she'll hit spirit refining while I'm still stuck at level 4. Mu thought, gazing at Ruashi's pretty face. Cultivation wasn't his strong suit. He was born for a side role, the one the protagonist smacks down in the tutorial zone. He was talented, yeah, but he'd wasted too much time. No instant power-up for him. He'd have to grind, unless he pulled a Yi and stumbled onto some insane opportunity. Actually, now that he thought about it, maybe he did have an opportunity like that. The bronze pieces, the heavenly Qi, that was his hustle, but he couldn't use all of it himself, no matter. Bai Ruashi would. She was sweet and obedient. If she hit spirit refining, maybe even land immortal, it wouldn't be wasted on her. Enlightenment realm, combination realm. Maybe too far off. Still, return to void. That's enough to swagger in this Xianxia world. Mu blinked, refocused, and sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed. His progress wasn't as crazy as Bai Ruashi's, but being around her sped things up. Mu Zhian knew how to count his blessings. He was just a starting area villain, after all. He couldn't expect to be Yi Yu just needed to grind, because he was the chosen one. Mu Zhian had to think. Work harder. He needed to figure out how to fleece Yi Yu, the fat sheep. He was the chosen one, after all. Bound to have some fleece-worthy fluff. Even if he couldn't use it himself, he could pass it around. Next morning, Bai Ruashi moaned softly, stretching. Her lashes fluttered open. A full night of meditating, and she felt amazing. She could feel it. She was knocking on the door of the spirit refining realm. Still at Qi training level 9, sure, but she was getting a taste of spirit refining, max level in Qi refining, and soon she'd be on a whole new level, not just the heavenly Qi, but her own talent and insight kicking in. She was thrilled. She swung her feet down and stepped onto the floor, then saw Mu Zhian sitting cross-legged by the bed, meditating. That handsome jawline caught her attention. It's not just guys who like pretty girls, girls like cute guys, too. Of course, guys just need to be put together and have decent social skills, and they're already halfway there. But Mu Zhian was good-looking and smooth, so he had a leg up. She got out of bed, and Mu Zhian seemed to sense her gaze. He opened his eyes, looked at her, and smiled. Morning, Ruashi. Bai Ruashi blushed. She said. Morning, Mr. Mu. Still calling me Mr. Mu? Time to switch it up, Mu Zhian said, gently taking her hand. The Bai family's oldest daughter blushed harder, ducking her head. She squeezed his warm hand and whispered, Mr. Mu, good morning. Asterisk that's the ticket, asterisk Mu felt a jolt of warmth. Sleep well, Bai Ruashi hesitated. Okay. Her eyes shone, she wanted to tell him about how she was at the door of spirit refining, but Mu spoke first. Don't push yourself. Mengru said spirit refining takes time to settle in. You're still at Qi level 9. Gotta be patient. He knew she was talented, but he didn't want her to get ahead of herself. It wasn't just talent. It was understanding. You couldn't rush it, asterisk, but I kind of have an idea of what spirit refining feels like, asterisk Bai Ruashi wanted to say. She looked at his kind face, and she kept it in, asterisk besides, I'm already getting the heavenly chi. If I don't get there soon, it'll be embarrassing, asterisk. I'll wait till I break into spirit refining, then surprise him. Going out today? Bai Ruashi asked suddenly. Mu Zhian smiled and nodded. Gonna get you a gift. A gift? Bai Ruashi tilted her head. What gift? Mu Zhian grinned. Can't tell you. It's a surprise. Tell me now. Bai Ruashi said, her voice just a little bit whiny. Mu Zhian felt a shiver of excitement. She was clueless about how adorable she was right now. She just stared into his eyes, waiting. Mu Zhian reached out and gently touched her smooth cheek. Gimme a kiss, and I'll tell you. What are you saying, so early in the morning? Bai Ruashi's cheeks flushed, even though she could probably stomp spirit refining guys. In the romance department, she was still stuck in chi refining. Mu Zhian looked at her. The sharp features, the straight nose, the pouty lips, a girl like that, all innocent and frail but secretly hot, was extra alluring when she got shy. Mu Zhian leaned in, kissed her cheek, and teased, someone might think I'm forcing you. Bai Ruashi turned redder, trying to change the subject. Can you tell me what you're gonna buy me now? Mu Zhian shook his head and smiled. Sorry, new rules. I said you had to kiss me. Bai Ruashi gave him a look, then gently shoved him away. Fine, don't tell me. You can leave. I wanna meditate. Let me reward you for all your hard work, Mu Zhian said, pulling her into his arms. What kind of reward is this? Bai Ruashi said, pushing feebly. She snuggled into his arms, teasing him. They were lovey-dovey for a while, then Mu Zhian left the room, satisfied. He was off to the dawn auction to play Feiying and buy some Liuguang soil, easy enough. The Mu family had pull in Tianxian City, dawn auction house. Lan Feiying lounged in her chair, legs crossed. The tight cheongsam showed off her curves. Her legs were long and white. The cheongsam made her look alluring. She held a teacup, sipping tea. A servant came in. Miss Feiying, the Mu family's eldest son is here. Mu Zhian. Lan Feiying's eyes flickered, then she smiled. Send him in. The auction was quiet this morning. She was just killing time. Soon, Mu Zhian was led in. He saw her, in her cheongsam. Today it was raven black, embroidered with plum blossoms. The skirt barely reached her thighs. The black dress made her skin look even paler. Sister Feiying looks lovelier than ever, Mu Zhian said, admiring her. Lan Feiying smiled. Smooth talker. Mu Zhian grinned. Just telling the truth. Lan Feiying poured him tea. After he sat, she propped her chin on her hand. You never drop by just to chat. Something up, right? Didn't want to bother you while you're busy, Mu Zhian said, sipping his tea. If you're free later, I'll treat you to some pastries at Chow Haiyan. Their osmanthus cake is amazing. Osmanthus cake, Lan Feiying considered that, her lips curving. Funny, I had osmanthus cake last night. Chow Hai In's cake always needs a reservation. You know the owner? Mu Zhian asked. Lan Feiying shook her head, teasing him. Someone gave it to me. Mu Zhian asked, boy or girl? Lan Feiying glanced at him. Man. But you could say it was a woman, too. The guy bought the cake for a girl, and I happened to be friends with that girl, so I had some. Lan Feiying clarified. Seeing Mu Zhian thinking, Lan Feiying changed the subject. Anyways, what brings you here? More than just a chat, right? Mu Zhian shook himself. Just chatting, mostly. And maybe needing something. Feiying smiled sweetly. What do you need? I heard you're auctioning off Liuguang soil soon, the stuff that keeps flowers fresh. Mu Zhian asked, playing dumb. Feiying raised her eyebrows. What do you need that stuff for? Mu Zhian didn't explain. Could you sell me some on the side? Lan Feiying eyed him, smiling. If you don't need much, sure. But I'm curious. What's the purpose? I'll tell you later, Mu Zhian said. Lan Feiying didn't buy it, she turned. How much soil? Mu Zhian hesitated. 5 portions. 0.3 people needed it, but 2 extra portions were a good idea. Lan Feiying lifted her chin and signaled for a servant to handle it. 5 portions wasn't that much. She could do it. She probably guessed what he was up to. Knowing wasn't the same as telling, though, but he said 5 portions. That's interesting. Lan Feiying narrowed her eyes. In the afternoon, Mu Zhian returned home. He saw Bai Ruoshi admiring the snow lotus by the pond. A ribbon showed off her waist and her chest, creating a figure that was both old-fashioned and sexy. Bai Ruoshi glanced up, smiling when she saw him. Mu Zhian smiled back, then took out a small box. What's this? Bai Ruoshi asked. Open it and see. Mu Zhian grinned. Bai Ruoshi opened the box. Inside was a handful of soil, like twinkling stars. This is Liuguang soil. Bai Ruoshi said, surprised. So, he went to the auction this morning to get this. Bai Ruoshi's eyes shimmered. Thank you. For you, anything, Ruoshi, Mu Zhian said, gazing at her. Then, suddenly, I found out that the osmanthus cake at Chow Hai In is good. I ordered 2 boxes. We can share tonight. Bai Ruoshi blushed. Okay. After she watched Mu Zhian walk away, she looked down at the box, wondering. Wei Mengru came out, saw Bai Ruoshi, and noticed the box. She figured it out. He went to the auction to get you that soil. Bai Ruoshi looked annoyed, then at the soil. He'd rather buy soil than go to the auction with me. He just wants me to skip the auction, right? Her face was unhappy. Wei Mengru was silent. She felt a flicker of pleasure, but she kept her face blank. What are you gonna do? Bai Ruoshi said coldly. He doesn't want me to go. I'm going. Huang Manting. She could handle Gong Suncheng, and she could handle her, too. Miss Bai wasn't just stacked, she was strong. She wasn't backing down. Wei Mengru looked at Miss Bai, her lips twitching. Told you. Never try to guess what people are thinking, especially women. When women are in love, their IQ drops to 0, but when they're catching someone in a lie, naive idiot, Chapter 66 Mu Zhian, I just want to be a good person 5K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After handing over one of the Luguangta scrolls to Lan Murian, Mu Zhian hopped in a carriage back to the Mu estate. Lan Murian wasn't really into crowds, so the auction house wasn't her thing. She only wanted the scroll. Basically, once she had the Luguangtu, there was no reason for her to even bother with the auction. Instead of dragging her to a packed event, it'd be better to find a chill place for her next time. As for Yilingxian, Mu Zhian skipped the Yi residence. His plan was to bump into Yilingxian, and the auction was the perfect opportunity. After his meeting with Huang Manting, he'd hit up the Yi sisters and try to figure out Yilingxian. After saying his goodbyes to Lan Murian, Mu Zhian climbed into the carriage, mulling over these things, and before he knew it, he was back at the Mu estate. As he opened the gate, Who did he see but that servant who'd already messed with him twice today, about to step into the courtyard? The attendant noticed someone behind him, turned around, and immediately said, "Young master." Mu Zhian gave a slight nod, glanced at the attendant, and asked, "Do you know what you did wrong?" The attendant was annoyed, but he didn't dare show it, and played innocent. "Young master, what did I do?" "The staff at our mansion always lead with their right foot when entering the courtyard, and you took your first step with the left." Mu Zhian said seriously. The attendant was totally baffled. When did that even become a thing around here? Think about it. Mu Zhian, leaving the attendant with a confused look, strolled into the courtyard and walked along the corridor toward Bai Ruoxi's room. The attendant scratched his head, staring after Mu Zhian. He still couldn't figure out what the young master was on about. Just then, another servant walked over and whispered, "What he means is, you need to read the room and know how to act accordingly. Working at the mansion wasn't just about doing your job, you had to pick up on the vibes." Mu Zhian was actually pretty chill. If this was the Gongsun family or even Chenxi Commerce, you'd probably be packing your bags the next day for pulling something like that. The servant was surprised and looked at Mu Zhian again, now with a little gratitude. A guy with Mu Zhian's status didn't need to spell it out for him, so the fact that he took the time to say something was a pretty big deal. "But you know, the young master's been acting different lately. He used to hit up the Jia Fengxi and the brothels all the time, but he hasn't been around for days," the servant said in a low voice. "With Miss Bai staying here, Mr. Mu doesn't need those places," the other replied. "But didn't he go to Yangfeng this afternoon?" the first servant whispered. "If I remember right, the Liangyi sect examiner is staying there." "Shoo. Let's not talk about that. We don't need to know all the details," the other warned. They glanced at each other and dropped the subject. "You just don't talk about the boss's private life, plain and simple, especially when it's something hush-hush." Mu Zhian quietly opened the door and slipped into the room. Bai Ruoxi was sitting cross-legged on the bed. She sat straight, her tied-up black hair hanging down. Under her snow-white neck, you could catch a glimpse of her delicate collarbone. She's trying to level up her qi refining so she can ace the sect exam. Mu Zhian, taking in the woman's pride, felt a little bad. Honestly, Bai Ruoxi was stressing for nothing. With her skills, nobody in the qi refining realm could touch her. Since Bai Ruoxi was still meditating, Mu Zhian didn't interrupt, but sat cross-legged next to her, closing his eyes. He figured he should be able to break through to the 4th level of qi training in the next few days. Time flew by, and before they knew it, auction day was here. That morning, Mu Zhian got dressed, making sure his robes looked sharp in front of the mirror. His face looked a little tired, no wonder. As a natural furnace, Mu Zhian had been putting in work almost every day, contributing to Bai Ruoxi's training. The whole process was boring, and Mu Zhian often found himself hugging Bai Ruoxi in bed, contemplating life. After fixing his robes, Mu Zhian glanced at Bai Ruoxi, still in bed. Her shoulders were barely visible under the covers. Her eyes were closed, like she was sleeping soundly. She'd been practicing too much and was worn out. Mu Zhian smirked and slipped out of the room. As the door clicked shut, Bai Ruoxi's eyelashes fluttered, and her eyes slowly opened. Morning light auction. Mu Zhian showed up at a private room on the 2nd floor, all decked out in a fancy, old-school style, where he met the Morning Light Commerce's wealthy boss lady. Huang Manting was chilling on the chair, her black hair loose, legs crossed. Her black dress showing off her porcelain skin. Her toes played with her shoes under her skirt. Smiling, she said, "Mr. Mu, you're right on time, you're even here early." Mu Zhian sat down, thanks to the maid, and smiled back. "Well, I said I'd be here, and I like to be early." Huang Manting pursed her lips and smiled. "Looks like we're alike." Mu Zhian picked up a teacup and took a sip. He glanced at the guests trickling in and smiled. "Why don't we cut to the chase while the auction hasn't started yet? I've got things to do later." Huang Manting tapped the chair, sipped her tea, and sighed softly. "You really played me a few days ago, Mr. Mu. Don't you have anything to say about the last couple days?" Mu Zhian paused, nodded with a smile, and said, "Thanks for your help lately. My family really likes those 3 markets. They've got good things to say." The Mu family was definitely happy with the Gongsun family's markets. Even though they weren't in prime locations, 3 markets could bring in a good amount of extra cash each month. Huang Manting's smile flickered, and she gave Mu Zhian a long look, asking, "When you came to see me, did you really just want those 3 markets?" Mu Zhian took a sip of tea and said, "I wanted to clear things up with you. Instead of letting you snoop around, I'd rather you just ask me what you want to know." Huang Manting locked eyes with Mu Zhian. She seemed to get it now, and there was a hint of anger in her eyes, with a fear hiding deep down. Everyone said the Mu family's eldest son was obsessed with girls and basically useless. Her past encounters with Mu Zhian seemed to confirm it, but what if he was faking it this whole time? When Mu Zhian came to her the other day, it was partly for the markets, partly to tell her to stop sending her guys to check him out, and partly for revenge. Plus, he totally got away with touching her at the Dawn Chamber of Commerce. She thought she was messing with him, but he was messing with her. Huang Manting felt a burning anger in her chest, staring at Mu Zhian, saying, "You're playing the long game, Mr. Mu. I just like to help out. You wanted to satisfy your curiosity, and I helped you do it. Isn't that enough?" Mu Zhian gently put down the teacup and said innocently, "I'm just trying to be nice, but do nice guys always get the short end of the stick? If our spies hadn't found out someone was investigating me, were you gonna dig up my whole life story?" Huang Manting was speechless. She'd started this whole thing, and Mu Zhian was just getting a little payback, which made it hard to argue with. More and more guests were showing up, and their chatter echoed through the private room. Silence filled the elegant room. After a moment, Huang Manting flashed a charming smile again, saying, "I'm sorry for snooping around, Mr. Mu. Let me pour you a drink." Mu Zhian raised an eyebrow and smiled, "Tea instead of wine?" Huang Manting grinned, "I'll invite you to our commerce one of these days for some real drinks. The Chenxi commerce has wine from everywhere. I heard your uncle has a good collection." "I'm looking forward to it," Mu Zhian said with a smile. The tension seemed to melt away, like nothing had happened. "But something's got me bummed out," Huang Manting suddenly sighed. "Do you really think I'm not as good as 3 markets, Mr. Mu?" She sounded like she was calling him out, but her voice was soft, almost flirtatious, enough to make anyone weak in the knees. Mu Zhian turned to look at her, her eyes wet and sad, and with her pretty face, it was enough to melt any heart. Mu Zhian gave a gentle smile. "You're worth more than 3 markets. Then why did you use me?" Huang Manting's voice was still soft and sweet, but there was a hint of danger in the air. Mu Zhian gently put down his teacup and sighed. "You mentioned wanting me as your Taoist partner, right?" "Nah," he said, shaking his head. "With your personality, I'd be working myself to the bone for you. But you want the horse to run without giving it grass. What do you think is more appealing, some distant grass or the markets right here?" Mu Zhian asked. Huang Manting narrowed her eyes slightly, placing her fair, soft hand on Mu Zhian's. Her fingernails gently scratched the back of his hand, making him twitch. "So if I offered you the right incentives, you'd pick me over Miss Bai Ruoxi?" Mu Zhian casually pulled his hand away and said with a smile, "Of course. With your looks, if there's something exciting, I know who to choose." Seeing Mu Zhian's serious look, and remembering how shy he was when he first met her, Huang Manting barely kept her smile in place, feeling like she'd been stabbed. If word got out that she'd been played like this, she'd never live it down. Huang Manting's toes tapped her black shoes, and she reached out, putting her hand on Mu Zhian's again, saying softly, "Miss Ruoxi won't get mad if she knew we were alone in a private room like this, would she?" "Nah, she's confident in her looks," Mu Zhian said with a smile. Formally, Mu Zhian would probably take the bait and flirt with Huang Manting, but after spending so much time with Bai Ruoxi lately, he'd lost that worldly desire, at least temporarily. Besides, Bai Ruoxi's family wasn't any smaller than Huang Manting's, she was prettier, and had a better body. Plus, there's that cold, fragile vibe that made guys want to protect her. It was a no-brainer. Huang Manting looked down at the auction from the private room, changing the subject. "Mr. Mu, what's your plan after joining the Liangyi sect?" "What plan could I have? I'll just do what I'm supposed to do." "You planning to start a new sect or something?" Mu Zhian joked. Huang Manting shook her head and said, "After we're in the Liangyi sect, our status in Tianxian City won't matter as much. I think we should help each other out. What can I, a scrub who isn't even at the 4th stage of chi training, do for you? Mu Zhian laughed. Just help when you can, and when you can't. Huang Manting paused, took a sip of tea, raised her eyes, and said softly, you can help me too. Click, Huang Manting's shoes fell to the floor, adding an awkward note to the air. Huang Manting looked at her toes, saying softly, I won't ask you to leave Miss Bai, just come hang out with me sometimes. Mu Zhian stared at her, and after a long pause, he said, that's a tempting offer. Huang Manting's eyebrows softened, and she glanced at him, saying, so you agree? Seeing the way Mu Zhian was looking at her, she already knew the answer, but she still wanted to hear him say it. Any guy would jump at the chance if a hot girl said something like that, and this was Mu Zhian falling into her trap. First, it's I don't want to break you two up, but eventually, Mu Zhian would get into sneaking around and wind up falling for her. Huang Manting knew guys, under Huang Manting's gaze. Mu Zhian nodded. Before Huang Manting could smile, he added, I'm good. Seeing Huang Manting's frozen smile, Mu Zhian finished his tea and stood up. There was a hint of anger in Huang Manting's eyes. She swallowed her anger and tried to make him stay. The auction's about to start. Don't you want to watch? I've got an appointment. Don't want to waste your time, Mu Zhian said with a smile. Under Huang Manting's gaze, Mu Zhian left the private room. If he accepted Huang Manting's offer, he could get some action early on, but to really get a girl like that, it'd cost a fortune, and compared to Huang Manting's lipstick, Bai Ruoshi's was way tastier. Mu Zhian stood in the corridor, scanning the seats below, looking for the Yi sisters. But he couldn't find Yi Lingxian and Yi Qian. That's weird. Did they even come, or are they in a private room? Mu Zhian thought of this when his eyes caught someone in front of a private room. A beautiful woman in a white dress and a veil stood there. Her clear, icy eyes were unforgettable. Lan Murian, crap. What's she doing here? She doesn't like places like this, so why? Mu Zhian stopped, hesitated, and started to head down in the other direction, but then he saw another familiar face behind him. Bai Ruoshi, wearing a simple dress, was talking to Wei Mengru. They were looking around, like they were searching for something. Mu Zhian paused, turned around, and went back into the private room. Huang Manting looked at him coldly, not saying a word. Miss Huang, I'm back. Mu Zhian wasn't embarrassed. He smiled and sat back down. Weren't you leaving? Changed your mind? Huang Manting asked coldly, her face now hard. Yeah. Something came up. Mu Zhian answered absent-mindedly, lost in thought. He suddenly realized things were getting out of hand. Huang Manting had composed herself. She looked at Mu Zhian, and seeing a hint of stress in his eyes, she narrowed her eyes. Something was up. He was about to leave, but he suddenly turned around. What could be out there that spooked him? Chapter 67. The Yi sisters were stolen. 5.5k, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Mu Zhian debated leaving early, the auction kicked off. A curvy, attractive woman took the stage, wearing a black cheongsam and flashing a charming smile as she greeted the guests. She's like a modern host, Mu Zhian thought, watching Fei Ying on the second floor. He scanned the mostly empty private boxes below, searching for Yi Lingxian. Guess I got stood up, he mused. Or maybe she's in a private room up there, but finding her there would be tough. He couldn't just knock on every door, could he? That'd be inefficient and risky. Plus, he'd told his senior sister he was busy today. Running into her here would be awkward. Miss Huang, Mu Zhian asked suddenly, do you know who's in these private rooms? Huang Manting glanced at him. The staff handles that. I don't pay attention. Seeing Mu Zhian's interest waning, she added, I can get you a list, but you'll have to tell me why you need it first. I'm looking for someone, Mu Zhian replied. Who? Too many questions, Miss Huang. We're not that close. Mu Zhian smiled. Huang Manting retorted, then figure it out yourself. Check each room until you find her. But by then, the auction might be over. Come on, Miss Huang, a little help goes a long way, Mu Zhian coaxed with a smile. Huang Manting raised an eyebrow. leaned back in her chair, and toyed with a strand of hair. If other friends asked, I'd help, but you and I aren't exactly buddies, are we? But she paused, changing her tone, and swung her feet in black embroidered shoes, teasing, or, you could kneel down and clean my toes. Then, maybe I'd consider it. Her toes arched slightly, creating a beautiful curve, matched with flawless, long legs under the black skirt, a captivating sight. Mu Zhian glanced at her, noticing the playful glint in her eyes. You're getting impatient, he chuckled. Huang Manting was clearly annoyed, a far cry from her earlier aloofness. Normally, she'd never say such things directly in front of others. While they bantered, items were being paraded across the stage, selling for high prices thanks to Fei Ying's charm. Some items might not have been worth the price, but Fei Ying's touch made them irresistible. Now, we have something special. A medicinal material from thousands of years ago. It's just a small piece of root now, but if we can find the water of reincarnation, we might restore its medicinal properties. Starting bid, 100 spirit stones. That announcement killed the room's enthusiasm. Everyone knew the Dawn auction house's code. Low value or unknown price equals a starting bid of 100 spirit stones. They'd seen this before, and most of these items were worthless, worse than trash. If genuine ancient artifacts showed up at every auction, the monks would have snatched them up, leaving no chance for any chosen one. But those monks have been burned too many times to care. 100 spirit stones weren't much, but Mu Zhian wasn't falling for it. Whether it was real or not, the water of reincarnation itself was probably as valuable as this ancient root. That water was in a forbidden zone in Dongzhou. Most who entered never returned. Some had been lucky enough to escape with the water, but they died mysteriously soon after handing it over for auction. The forbidden zone was cursed. No one had ever survived the curse. Hearing water of reincarnation, the guests lost interest. Fei Ying wasn't surprised, she smiled. Okay, counting down from 3. If there are no bids, the item will go unsold. Fei Ying said softly, 3. 110 spirit stones. A calm voice came from the audience, and everyone's eyes turned to the young man, Yi Yu from the Yi family. Mu Zhian also looked over. Yi Yu's here. Didn't see him, and he's reached the Qi training stage. Well, now I'm interested. Mu Zhian thought, Yi Yu wouldn't bid on that withered root without a reason. The old man inside him must have said something. Huang Manting glanced at Yi Yu. She'd planned to woo Yi Yu before the sect assessment. This Yi family genius had jumped from refining essence to training Qi in months. It was worth her time, but Yi Yu and Mu Zhian didn't get along. Winning over Yi Yu would push Mu Zhian away. It felt twisted to say, but if Mu Zhian hadn't messed with her 2 days ago, she'd have already started her plan. But after thinking it over, she chose Mu Zhian. He wasn't just smart. She enjoyed conquering others. The more Mu Zhian ignored her, the more she wanted him. Many men feigned indifference, hoping to trick her, but they'd all fallen at her feet. She'd hate such a man even if he licked her shoes. She wanted a servant who wasn't interested in her being conquered, kneeling and kissing her feet, the man with the most beautiful woman in Tianxian City as his partner secretly being Huang's servant, kneeling every day trying to please her. The thought was exhilarating. It seemed difficult, but that's the fun of it, right? Bid 120 spirit stones, Mu Zhian told the maid beside Huang Manting. The maid glanced at Huang Manting. Go on, what are you waiting for? Mu Zhian patted her bottom. The maid looked at Huang Manting, awaiting her answer. Mr. Mu has spoken. What are you waiting for? Huang Manting said lazily. Refusing would risk Mu Zhian leaving, which would hurt her plans. As Yi Yu spoke, cultivators looked at him, some with a hint of sarcasm. Why was the Yi family's genius so interested in trash? First, the bronze piece, now this root. Yi Yu ignored them, looking calmly at Fei Ying, suppressing the heat in his heart. The old man inside said this root was an ancient medicinal material, Longting whisk. It wasn't true that it needed the water of reincarnation. Alchemists were born with an affinity for plants. The Longting whisk could recover if it stayed with one of them, but it would take hundreds or thousands of years. But there was another elixir that could speed up the process. Taking the Longting whisk and refining that elixir would work. These people didn't understand its value. Yi Yu sneered, why not get it at the lowest price? 120 spirit stones. A clear voice came from a private room. Yi Yu narrowed his eyes, looking at the room. Sounds like someone just having fun, Yi Yu said. 130. 140 spirit stones. Yi Yu's face froze, realizing it was tit for tat. 200 spirit stones. Yi Yu said. 210. The maid's calm voice came again. There was a stir, and people wondered who was in that room. It seemed less about wanting the roots and more about messing with Yi Yu. Yi Yu frowned. 300 spirit stones, that was his limit. He'd planned to auction some pills he'd made, but they weren't up yet, and he didn't have more spirit stones. Why does someone always have to stop me? Yi Yu clenched his fists, anger burning. Mu Zhian had auctioned off the bronze piece. His master had told him the bronze sword by Ruashi used in the arena might have come from that piece. He'd been resentful then, and now he was pushed to the edge. He knew this was valuable and no one else knew it, but Mu Zhian had to show up. If it weren't for Mu Zhian, he'd be invincible among his peers. Yi Yu looked at the private room, his eyes flickering. Could it be Mu Zhian again? That his hatred reached a boiling point. Mu Zhian drank tea, laughing secretly. He'd used half of the 100,000 spirit stones from Mr. Huang, leaving 50,000, enough to live well for a while. He didn't know what the root was for, but if Yi Yu wanted it, he'd fight him. The chosen son was a cash cow. Mu Zhian took the teacup from the maid and drank slowly. Then, a clear, sweet voice said, 1,000 spirit stones. Mu Zhian looked toward the voice. Yi Lingxian. Standing up for Yi Yu. Mu Zhian felt jealous. If I bid, will she give up? But Mu Zhian would rather die than bid himself. That would expose his presence. Keep bidding, no matter how high they go. Mu Zhian told the maid. He put down the teacup, opened the curtain, and left. 1,100 spirit stones. 1,200. Yi Lingxuan's voice came again. Mu Zhian narrowed his eyes, looking at the corner room. Is it over there? He quickened his pace. Meanwhile, in a tidy private room, Yi Qian sat obediently, looking at the purple-dressed girl beside her. Sister, why did you bid on that? For brother Yi Yu. Yi Lingxian glanced at her sister. He's family. We haven't talked in years, but if he wants it, we'll bid. Better to give to family than strangers. She'd be leaving Tianxian City soon. This was a parting gift. Yi Qian was silent. I wonder where brother Mu went. He promised he'd be here. Yi Lingxian said, I've known he's no good. Why'd you expect him to show up? Yi Qian took her sister's arm. Then why were you getting ready so early? Yi Lingxian smiled. Don't you dress up for a big event? She touched Yi Qian's lips. You always dress simply, but today you dressed better than me. Could it be, for Mu Zhian? Yi Lingxian smiled. Yi Qian looked down. What are you talking about? I dressed up for the auction. Yi Lingxian saw her reaction. She drank tea. No matter what, Mu Zhian's no good. He didn't show up. He's probably with other women. Yi Qian was disappointed, but didn't say anything. He made an appointment and didn't show up. Maybe her sister was right. 1,300 spirit stones. Came a new offer. The price was too high for most young cultivators. They had the money, but it wasn't worth it for a root. 1,500. Yi Lingxian frowned, annoyed. Yi Qian put her hand on Yi Lingxuan's. Calm down. It's not worth it. It was okay to help Yi Yu because they played together, but not worth it if they spent too much. I want to see how far they'll go. Yi Lingxian said. The mysterious young lady was angry. She opened her mouth. Then the curtain opened. They looked up and saw a handsome young man. Sorry we're late, he said apologetically. Yi Lingxian was surprised, then said coldly, Mr. Mu, I thought you weren't coming. I couldn't find you. If I hadn't heard you bidding, I wouldn't have found you until the end. Mu Zhian said with a smile. If I hadn't found you, you might have raised it to tens of thousands. If you raised it to that much, even I'd be hurting. Mu Zhian added. The sisters exchanged shocked looks. The one bidding against them was the Mu family's young master. In the audience, Yi Yu looked at the sexy woman in the cheongsam, anxious. Why didn't my sister keep bidding? Did she run out of money, that he didn't want the soaring dragon beard to fall into the wrong hands? Only alchemists could warm it. Others would just waste it. Only I can restore it. Yi Yu thought. I can ask Lingxian for spirit stones. I have to get it. It will help me in the future. Yi Yu stared at the roots. He walked quickly toward a private room. It should be here. I thought I heard Lingxian. Yi Yu looked at the room and lifted the curtain. Then, a soft voice came from the private room. Sister Qianer, I've been looking for you everywhere since I entered the auction house. Lingxian doesn't believe me, and you don't either. You smell like other women's rouge. Did you go to a brothel? Yi Lingxuan's voice said clearly. That's the rouge you're wearing. Smell it. Mr. Mu, please be respectful. Yi Lingxuan's tone was stern. Hearing the sounds of fighting, Yi Yu's heart sank and he opened the curtain. Chapter 68. No one can be spared by heaven. 3K. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Yi Yu pulled back the curtain, the room fell silent, revealing the scene inside. Yi Lingxian, poised and elegant, sat on the plush couch. She was at that beautiful, youthful age, with dark, striking eyebrows, cherry-red lips, and delicate features. Beside her sat another girl, equally well-behaved, in light, airy clothing. Though a year or two younger than her sister, her chest was noticeably fuller, hinting at a blossoming figure. The two sisters were close in age, and sitting near them was a rather handsome young man, Mu Zhian. As the curtain lifted, the voices faded. Mu Zhian glanced up and saw Yi Yu. He immediately sensed the jealous glare in his eyes. Calmly setting down his teacup, he looked at the two, and asked, Lingxian, were you expecting someone else? Yi Lingxian shook her head slightly, and with a polite smile, asked, Yi Yu, what's up? Yi Yu, his voice laced with anger, stared at Mu Zhian and demanded, why are you with him? Lingxian and I haven't been to an auction house before, so we wanted someone to come with us, Yi Qian said softly. I asked you a few times, Yi Yu, but you were always busy. We didn't want to interrupt your training. Yi Qian had, in fact, invited him before, only to be turned down with the excuse of training. He'd automatically assumed that going to an auction with his cousin was a waste of time. He'd never bothered to reach out before. Only now that he saw her with another man did he feel slighted. As for Yi Lingxian, she was a proud woman who didn't typically invite others. If it hadn't been for Yi Qian, she wouldn't have even written the letter to Mu Zhian in the first place. Simply put, Yi Yu didn't want his sister to leave him, but he wasn't willing to spend time with her either. Fixing his gaze on the relaxed Mu Zhian, Yi Yu muttered, you shouldn't be hanging out with him. He's bad news. Yi Lingxian frowned slightly, but kept her tone polite. Yi Yu, Mu Zhian is our guest. If you don't have anything else, please head back. After all, Mu Zhian was her guest, and any conflict between him and Yi Yu shouldn't be aired in public like this. If you had asked, I would have made time, Yi Yu insisted. You're my sisters. A little time isn't a big deal. Having them both at the Yi residence, Yi Yu had subconsciously assumed they'd always be around. Seeing them with Mu Zhian, however, finally sparked a sense of alarm. Mu Zhian had remained silent, but at Yi Yu's words, he almost choked back a laugh. Yi Yu might not be a complete idiot, but his EQ was definitely in the gutter. Spending time with a girl is a waste of time. Even if he really thought that way, he shouldn't say it out loud. He wanted to woo her but wouldn't put in the effort. What kind of protagonist was he, waiting for the girl to chase after him? What's more, girls like Yi Qian, and even Yi Lingxian, had plenty of admirers. If he wasn't going to step up, someone else would. Yi Lingxian was clearly uncomfortable. Yi Yu, please just go back. Qianer is safe with me, and Mu Zhian will escort us back to the Yi mansion later. That's right. I'll personally see them home after the auction, Mu Zhian added, gently patting Yi Qian's head. The Yi family's carriage is parked outside. It's a little cramped, but both Lingxian and Qian'er are slender, so it shouldn't be too crowded. That simple sentence nearly sent Yi Yu over the edge. He pictured the scandalous scene in the carriage on the way back. He glared at Mu Zhian, barely containing his rage. 1,700 spirit stones. Any higher bids? Fei Ying's smooth voice cut through the air. A few bidders had already driven the price of the dragon whisker up to a considerable sum. The bidding seemed to calm Yi Yu down slightly. Seeing his two sisters so close to Mu Zhian had made him nearly forget his real reason for coming. Compared to the dragon whiskers, everything else paled in importance. No matter how lustful Mu Zhian might be, he wouldn't dare lay a hand on Yi Lingxian and Yi Qian. The most pressing matter was securing the dragon whiskers. This idiot had no idea how valuable it was. Yi Yu turned to Yi Lingxian. Lingxian, do you have any spirit stones to spare? Yi Lingxian frowned slightly, glancing at Mu Zhian. She knew he wanted the whisker too. If she borrowed money, Yi Yu caught her expression. He eyed Mu Zhian, and accused, were you the one bidding against me earlier? Mu Zhian smiled. I just happened to be a little interested in that whisker too. Yi Yu's gaze turned icy. What did he mean, interested in the whisker? Mu Zhian was clearly targeting him. But he had no other option. He couldn't hope to match Mu Zhian's wealth. Even so, he'd make Mu Zhian pay. Yi Yu turned back to the elegant woman in the purple dress. Lingxian, can you lend me some spirit stones? Yi Lingxian frowned again. Yi Yu's words had put her on the spot. Lending the spirit stone to Yi Yu meant siding against Mu Zhian, but refusing him seemed equally wrong. They had, after all, grown up together at the Yi family. A smarter person wouldn't have put her in that position, but Yi Yu was clearly losing it. Targeted by Mu Zhian time and time again, he saw his two sisters in the same room as him, and the jealousy in his heart was burning. Just then, Yi Lingxian felt a warm hand gently close over her own beneath the table. Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at Mu Zhian, a flash of annoyance in her eyes, but as their eyes met, Mu Zhian gave a subtle nod. He wanted her to lend the spirit stone to Yi Yu. She realized what he meant, and after a moment of surprise, took out a small box from her ring and handed it to Yi Yu. These are the 2,000 spirit stones I have with me. Here, Yi Yu. Her voice was already edged with the kind of coldness that kept people at arm's length. Yi Yu's scowl faded. He glanced at Mu Zhian, looking for a sign of anger. Mu Zhian, however, remained calm, sipping his tea as if nothing was wrong, trying to play the rich young master in front of Qian'er and Lingxian, but they aren't impressed by money. Yi Yu thought to himself, smirking. He grabbed the box and said with a smile, Lingxian, I'll return the 2,000 spirit stones when we get back to the Yi mansion. He knew Mu Zhian would continue to bid, and the point of borrowing the money was to make him bleed, and show him who they really cared about. Between Mu Zhian and him, Yi Lingxian and Yi Qian would choose him every time. It was all about hurting Mu Zhian's ego. Returning to his seat, Yi Yu immediately shouted, 2,300 spirit stones. Sure enough, the maid next to Huang Manting raised the price again. 2,400 spirit stones. Yi Yu scoffed and held his tongue. Across the room, Yi Lingxian turned to Mu Zhian, offering a rare apology. Sorry for costing you an extra 2,000 spirit stones. She had only wanted to enjoy the glazed earth auction, but now the company was suffering the consequences of a petty rivalry. Yi Qian's eyes were also apologetic, and her brow was furrowed. Mu Zhian gently set down his teacup, shaking his head and smiling. I already said the matter between Yi Yu and I has nothing to do with you. Don't worry about it. Still, I'll return the 2,000 spirit stones when we get back, Yi Lingxian insisted. Yi Lingxian was an intelligent girl, and she knew Mu Zhian was doing this for them. If spending 2,000 extra spirit stones helps you both relax, it's worth it, Mu Zhian said. It might seem like he was losing money, but he wasn't really. Catching Yi Lingxian's apologetic gaze and Yi Qian's obvious displeasure, Mu Zhian silently took a sip of tea. He then poured a cup for each of them. Don't be so glum. If one thing is making you unhappy, why not let something else make you happy? Yi Lingxian's eyes softened slightly. True, the money might be annoying, but thinking about it differently, someone cared enough to be taken advantage of for her sake. That subtle tenderness was warming. She'd just have to return the 2,000 spirit stones later. For Yi Lingxian, a few spirit stones were nothing. Yi Qian suddenly felt a light touch on the back of her hand. Her heart leaped and she glanced at Mu Zhian. His handsome profile and high nose made him seem like the boy next door. Her heart fluttered, her eyes flashed, and she glanced at her sister guiltily. She didn't pull away her hand, but lowered her head in silence. It seemed her first impression was correct. Yi Qian was the innocent, easily swayed type. As long as he spoke gently, looked good, and treated her well, there wouldn't be a problem. Meanwhile, the soaring dragon whisker was finally knocked down to Mu Zhian for 2,400 spirit stones. Yi Yu looked up toward the elegant room, and said with a sneer, Mu spent 2,400 spirit stones on trash. What a hero. In the private room, Mu Zhian, who was playing with Yi Qian's soft little hands, chuckled inwardly. Yi Yu, that fool, thought he was getting the better of him, but in fact, his whole house was about to be robbed. Then, he suddenly remembered something important, and the smile gradually froze on his face. Damn it, that's not right. If it were normal, Mu Zhian would naturally win a big victory this time. However, he didn't know if it was an illusion, but Mu Zhian vaguely seemed to hear. Someone gently lifted the curtain to the private room outside. When he heard footsteps approaching, Mu Zhian felt a cold feeling from head to toe. Yi Yu had indeed won this time. This young man completely exposed the fact that he accompanied the Yi sisters at the auction house. Chapter 69, Mu Zhian #039, Shura Field Crisis 4K, 1/2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lan Feiying, standing before the auction house's elevated platform, smiled down at Yi Yu. Though her face didn't show it, her opinion of him had definitely soured. For an auctioneer, nothing's more irritating than someone who messes with the bidding flow. She'd initially thought Yi Yu was alright. Not exactly handsome, but presentable, and seemed talented enough, but who knew he'd be so petty and clueless about what it's like up on stage? Normally, an interruption wouldn't be a huge deal, but her sister was watching from a private room. Lan Feiying wanted to show off her skills. Thinking of this, she glanced up at the second-floor private room. The thin curtain of one room was slightly parted, and a woman in pale white embroidered shoes stepped out. She surveyed the scene, her gaze settling on a particular private room, and gracefully walked toward it. Weird. Is something up with my sister? Lan Feiying wondered, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Lan Murian hadn't planned to attend the auction. Then she decided to see her sister in action. Lan Feiying shook her head, dismissing the thought, and turned back to the crowd, speaking again to draw everyone's attention back to the auction. Meanwhile, in a private room, Mu Zhian held a teacup in one hand and Yi Qian's delicate hand under the table, fiddling with it distractedly. He appeared calm, but inside, he was freaking out. Yi Yu so uncool. He couldn't just win, so he had to blurt out details to stir things up. Mu Zhian fumed inwardly. Since regaining his memories, he'd been in control, whether deflecting the Gongsun family, outmaneuvering the Dawn Chamber of Commerce, or snagging that heavenly power. The only hiccup was the sky-devouring Python Queen, and she outmatched him way too much to do much. But now, things were seriously going off the rails. Yi Yu's words were basically mocking Mu Zhian for blowing over 2,000 spirit stones on junk. In reality, Yi Lingxian would return the money. Mu Zhian planned to use the refund as a way to invite her for tea, scoring points with her. It was like Yi Yu was playing checkers while Mu Zhian was playing 3D chess, but, with external factors, Yi Yu's attack skipped several levels to get at him. Mu Zhian sipped his tea, lost in thought. What's wrong? Yi Qian, noticing his unease, looked at him worriedly. Yi Lingxian also noticed something was up and said softly, if you're not feeling well, don't push yourself. We'll take you home. Usually, Mu Zhian would jump at the chance for the sisters to take him home. Getting a foot in the door. But now, Mu Zhian shook his head and smiled. I'm fine. Just thinking. But your hands are sweaty. Are you sure? Yi Qian asked quietly. Mu Zhian's hand, hidden beneath the table, held hers, so she felt his temperature shift. Really, it's nothing, he said, waving it off. Just then, he heard footsteps approaching. The auction was still going on. As the footsteps drew closer, Mu Zhian clenched his other hand, pressed it to his mouth, and faked a rough cough. Ahem, ahem, ahem. He hoped to hint that the person looking for the room had the wrong one. However, these coughs directly coughed by Ruashi, who was at the door. She lifted the curtain, revealing her beautiful face to the trio. By Ruashi, pale skin and a white dress, looked particularly delicate. To most men, By Ruashi was the kind of woman who sparked a protective instinct, someone to cherish and adore, but to Mu Zhian, By Ruashi appearing at the doorway was a lit fuse. Her usual vulnerable demeanor was gone. She looked at Mu Zhian, then the Yi sisters, Yi Lingxian and Yi Qian scrutinized the famous beauty. Sister Bai, what's up? Yi Lingxian asked with a faint smile. Bai Ruashi shot a quick glance at Mu Zhian before looking at Yi Lingxian in her purple dress and said, I'm looking for someone. Who? Yi Lingxian glanced at Mu Zhian. Could it be Mr. Mu? That she smirked. I recall Mr. Mu chasing after my sister for a while, only to be rejected. But I heard you two were cozy by the martial arts arena a couple days ago. Sounds like you're together now. Is that right? Bai Ruashi didn't answer. Her eyes swept over the two girls, first, the elegant Yi Lingxian, smiling in her purple dress, ribbon showing off her waist and a glimpse of calf, then her sister. The sweet Yi Qian had pulled her hand away, noticing their gazes, she smiled and started to speak. Mu Zhian poured Bai Ruashi tea, trying to interrupt, and said, Ruashi, what are you doing at the auction so early? Something you want to buy? Have a seat, have some tea first. He looked up at her and smiled gently. Bai Ruashi glanced at him, then the Yi sisters. She sat, surprisingly not asking why he was with other girls. She leaned forward, picked up the teacup, and took a sip. The move made her chest press on the table, putting the other two to shame. The atmosphere turned awkward, but Mu Zhian was relieved. He wasn't afraid of awkward, but of Bai Ruashi's aggressive questions. She had been about to say something dangerous, but he'd thankfully cut her off. Bai Ruashi was as he thought, passive and a bit of a pushover. Yi Yu's intrusion was within manageable limits. He needed to take control, ease the tension. Mu Zhian smiled and opened his mouth to speak. Then, the curtain swayed, and someone else lifted it. A beautiful woman in a moon-white dress stood there, her hair pulled back with a white ribbon, her black hair cascading down her back. She glanced at everyone, then focused a cold gaze on Mu Zhian, a mix of amusement and anger in her eyes. Senior sister Lon. Mu Zhian's smile froze. He stiffened, like a statue ready to shatter. Yi Lingxian and Yi Qian were surprised. They knew who she was, but never thought the examiner would show up here, much less in this private room. Did she get the wrong room? Or is she looking for someone like Bai Ruashi? The sisters looked at Mu Zhian silently. Senior sister Lan and Mu Lang have something going on. Bai Ruashi's eyes clouded over. Mu Zhian, under their scrutiny, calmly set down his teacup and gave a composed smile. Senior sister, what brings you here? Thought you weren't interested in the auction. Lan Murian glanced around, a faint smile playing on her lips. I came to find someone, but it's a coincidence I ran into you. You said you couldn't make it to the dawn auction today. I thought you had important business. Turns out, you already had a date. That she stared at him coldly. He told me something similar. Bai Ruashi sighed softly. Even the women were touched by the scene. She looked at Mu Zhian and asked softly, Mu Lang, why aren't you saying anything? The room fell silent. That simple name silenced everyone. Mu Zhian never thought the nickname he used to tease Bai Ruashi would be spoken here. Women often added Lang to show affection. It was a subtle way to indicate affection without being overly forward. Though she seemed delicate, Bai Ruashi knew what she was doing. Yi Qian, recently experiencing love, looked downcast and didn't speak. When upset, she didn't show it, just quietly endured. Yi Lingxuan's face was cold as she looked at Bai Ruashi. The address felt like a declaration of ownership. Mu Zhian's actions had made Yi Lingxian think he was alright, but Bai Ruashi was saying back off. Lan Murian's face was hidden, but her eyes grew colder. Mu Zhian often wrote letters to Lan Murian, expressing his longing. She felt a little something for the younger man, and hearing Bai Ruashi's name hit her hard. Yi Yu stood outside, listening. He wanted to mock Mu Zhian before leaving, but overhearing the conversation made him unsure whether to gloat or envy. After a pause, Yi Qian, her eyes red, asked, "Miss Bai, are you joking?" Bai Ruoshi used to hate Mu Zhian. When she and her sister walked down the street, he'd follow her like a fly, but she never gave him the time of day, and now she was calling him Mulang. Bai Ruoshi shook her head and looked at Mu Zhian softly. "I wouldn't joke about this. I've brought Mulang home to meet my parents." Her face flushed. "We've practiced dual cultivation." The atmosphere froze, even Lan Mulian looked shocked, Yi Yu's jaw dropped. They had been together for only a short time, but their relationship had already progressed that far, and why was the examiner involved with Mu Zhian? Wasn't she an inner disciple? If Yi Yu had been gloating, now he was just jealous. At least the sisters should see what kind of player Mu Zhian was. A small comfort. Yi Yu felt anger and jealousy. A goddess was getting played, and he could do nothing. Inside the private room, Mu Zhian didn't speak. He couldn't. No explanation would help. Anything he said would be used against him, but there was a way out. Though this dented his image, Mu Zhian had a feeling this was coming. If you walk on the water long enough, you'll fall in. Even him, he was a bit panicked, but not to the point of despair. Mu Zhian knew Bai Ruoshi's personality. He knew the other women too. The crisis seemed intense, but there was an escape route. Mu Zhian was known as a player who chased after beauty. The women knew this, but his words and actions made them ignore it, bringing the sisters to the auction, and the revelation of his relationship with Bai Ruoshi, just reminded them of who Mu Zhian was. He couldn't speak, but someone could.